Let's check in with Joseph Lindsley in Ukraine.
You know, how nothing could prepare you for the hell of war.
Joe. Little fucking Joe Lindsley.
Joe Lindsley is quickly becoming an American treasure in broadcasting.
Welcome to Ukraine Bank.
Joe, I'm curious about what you think about this story regarding President Zelensky. He met with the Saudi Crown Prince. They discussed what they term a peace formula. What do you make of all of that?
Bob, good afternoon from Kyiv. And can you hear me clearly, Bob?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, I thought I cut out for a
got you
second.
connected. Mm-hmm.
Great,
nope.
fantastic.
Those Russians are not interfering with us at the moment.
Well, and I'm in Kyiv, so it's much safer here than a few days ago when I was 30 miles from Russia in Kharkiv. You know, I don't, you know, with the countries like Saudi Arabia have been a bit ambiguous on this. I mean, Saudi Arabia was actually very crucial in negotiating the release of Ukrainian and foreign fighters who were imprisoned by the Russians, including people I know who were sentenced to death in the Donetsk, so-called Donetsk People's Republic. It was thanks to Saudi Arabia that they were released. And so, you know, they've tried to position themselves as sort of neutral on this, but I don't put much stock in it. I mean, I think, you know, sort of Middle Eastern nations are sort of, you know, trying to hedge their bets, and even more so than countries around the world. And, you know, we see sort of, I think the thing to focus on is President Macron in France yesterday gave a very strong speech, but it was strange in a way. He said, you know, we should consider sending United Nations troops, sending troops to Ukraine. And on the face of it, it sounds incredibly strong, but it's actually served to scare more people, to say, well, you know, we don't want to inflame the situation. We don't want to send warriors to Ukraine. And actually, the Ukrainian response to Macron was, we don't need you to send troops, just send weapons. And I think, you know, with all these, you know, you can have all these different meetings and peace formulas, and, you know, we see whether it's talking about peace formulas or talking about reconstruction, all of that is, in a sense, a way to avoid the difficult and pressing matter of, will countries send weapons so Ukrainians can continue to hold the line and to fight against the Russians? And that's really all it comes down to is, you know, I mean, after 2 years now, you know, again, Washington, for example, still refuses to send long-range weapons. The question is why? Washington still refuses to give Ukraine permission to attack Russian military bases. Why? And I think that's really the question that so many Western leaders are trying to avoid.
Interesting email from one of our listeners, Joseph. Let me read this. Tuesday's talk generated a lot of questions for me that Joseph might be able to explain as time permits. He mentioned that Biden could send weapons to Ukraine now. Could you explain what President Biden could do without Congress approval? He also discussed using long-range weapons to hit inside Russia. Wouldn't you fear significant retaliation on Ukraine by Russia? And finally, giving Ukraine weapons does help with jobs and a profit for the defense industry, as you both mentioned, but isn't a lot of this money used for the cost to make the weapons, which are then sent to Ukraine? Want to take on any of those questions, Joseph?
Yeah, sure. All three of them. On the last one, the cost to make the weapons to send to Ukraine, the weapons that the United States and every country are sending to Ukraine were produced and paid for a long time ago. Many of these weapons have been sitting in storage, unused, because Canada and Mexico are not invading the United States. Well, I know people would see that different. There's no military invasion of the United States, and a lot of these weapons are unused, and so and some of them were due to sort of be retired. And so actually, if you look at the cost of storing the weapons versus for years and years and years, like in some kind of Indiana Jones warehouse, or the cost of sending them to Ukraine, probably it's more economical to send them here. On the question of President Biden's authority you can say whether it's a good or bad thing for the president to have this type of power, but there's something called the Presidential Drawdown Authority, and it enables the executive, the White House and the president to send weapons around the world. Even if we go back and look at during the beginning of World War II, when Winston Churchill was asking FDR for weapons, FDR was limited. Congress refused to get involved. The United States had to be neutral, but FDR had things he could do, and it depended on how much he chose to care that this was something that that he wanted to help with. And so we even had stories that the United States put weapons near the border with Canada, and the Brits had to use horses and tractors to take these, to be within the letter of the law to get those weapons. But they did, and so that could happen now, and even we don't even have to go to these extreme lengths. I mean, the White House, could, as they've done before, as they did last October, they could just choose to send even 15 or 20 of these attackers, these long-range missile launchers that are extremely effective. And Ukrainians used them very effectively within a week of their arrival last October. And then no one even talked about it. No one asked the White House, well, why don't you send more? So there's a lot of things that the White House is putting all of the blame on Republicans now, but there's not enough scrutiny really of why the White House won't do what they can do. And we don't, we rarely hear from the National Security Advisor, Jake Sullivan, the word victory. It's always as long as it takes. But what does that mean? And you can understand why people get frustrated with that. And then on the question of red lines, this is what Russia has, said since the beginning. If you support Ukraine in any way, we'll turn to the school shooter and we'll blow everyone up. Well, but we've seen time and time again, those red lines don't really exist. I mean, when the British government sent Ukraine the Storm Shadow missiles, this amazing French-British product, and when the Brits said, use them however you wish, because I think the Brits really remember how they almost lost their country in World War II. And so Ukrainians used those to hit the headquarters of Russia's Black Sea Naval Fleet, the headquarters. That's pretty extraordinary. That's crossing a lot of red lines. And that was in September. It was late August or early September. And there was months of very few major Russian missile attacks after that. So we see time and again when Ukrainians actually hit, places in Russia, when they're able to do it, and in occupied Crimea, there's no major Russian response. And, as I think about how, today is a beautiful sort of spring-like day here in Kyiv. And it's remarkable. Everyone thought we were going to have no power and heat and electricity. And here we are. And winter's almost over. And yet, if you look at stories from within Russia, even in Moscow, it has been a winter plagued by power difficulties. And there's a lot of speculation, has there been Ukrainian sabotage there? But, we have seen evidence of Ukrainian drone attacks on Russian oil refineries. And each time, there's no major response from Russia. And so it's just a matter of, this is where the Russian dissident and chess grandmaster Garry Kasparov has said, this, as I mentioned before, this is not a chess game. It's a poker game. Who's the big bad wolf and who will stand up to it?
Yeah, it reminds me of all the years of scary al-Qaeda threats after 9/11 that never materialized. This would be a good time for me to remind you that you can text us or email us any questions or comments for Joseph Lindsley. The text line, it's the same as the phone number, 312-981-7200, and the email is bobshow@wgnradio.com. We welcome all comments and questions and criticisms. Joseph, you have a thick skin. You can withstand anything, I believe, can't you?
Well, I think especially after I've been in places, with missiles hitting very close to me, you worry about other things. And that reminds me, yesterday I had, right after we spoke, I had an interview in the studios of Ukrainska Pravda, Ukrainian Truth here in Kyiv, with Ukraine's top tennis player, Serhiy Stakhovsky. He's a winemaker and tennis player. And he, in 2013, he at Wimbledon, he defeated the then reigning Wimbledon champion, Roger Federer. And so it was a great moment for Ukrainian sports. And so now he's a soldier. And he was telling me stories about being, at the front lines in a Zoom during the liberation of Kharkiv region and Bakhmut. And I asked him, I said, as a world-class athlete, did that prepare you in any way for being in war. And really the pointed question was, that moment when you were defeating Roger Federer at Wimbledon, you were defeating the reigning Wimbledon champion. Was there any similarity to that experience and being, in battle during that liberation of Kharkiv region? And he said no. He said actually, not really, because as a sportsman there was joy. As difficult as it was, when he was going against the number 1, number 2 tennis player in the world, it was a joyful thing. And he said there was no joy in what he was doing at the front. Having to kill the invaders. There was nothing comparable to that. Not even his elite sportsman life. But he said maybe his hope is that on the day of victory, when the Russian invaders leave, he said that certainly will be more joyful than that moment of defeating Roger Federer. But this is, here's someone who, has thick skin, is a world-class athlete, and still was telling me, how nothing could prepare you for the hell of war.
Yes, that's for sure. Enjoy your nicer than Chicago weather, Joe, and we'll talk to you. We'll talk to you tomorrow.
Until tomorrow. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you for introducing Ukraine on your social media pages. That's very important, that much more people can get more information about the situation here and how everybody can help Ukraine to stay stronger and to save all the world.
Что он сказал?
Well, which side are you on?
На чьей ты стороне?
Come on now. Oh, which side are you on?
На чьей ты стороне?